All right, everyone. So we just finished the Vince McMahon documentary, Mr. McMahon. We were looking forward to watching this because there was so much hype about it, and we were going to do a review on each episode individually. Decided that I don't think there was enough here necessarily to do a review on each one. I'm considering going back again and watching it. Maybe 1, 2, 3 months from now, and then from that, maybe doing individual reviews on each episode, but we wanted to do a big overview for this. So, it was, we'll just get right into it. It was definitely interesting, right? Because if you're a fan of wrestling, you love kind of the history of it, you love hearing about it, kind of the behind the scenes stuff and hearing from different wrestlers and from everybody. But there's nothing here if you're someone who's into wrestling that's new. If you're somebody that has watched any of the documentaries that WWE has produced or Dark Side of the Ring or any of those, I mean, I know WWE doesn't produce Dark Side of the Ring, but I'm saying if you watched any of the documentaries WWE has produced or you've watched Dark Side of the Ring, I don't think there's anything new here. I think this is all kind of stuff that's known. Now, obviously, episode 6, that's a little different, right? Because this is where it goes from the first 5. You could have gone and said, hey, this is a documentary put out by WWE. I mean, seriously, there were some moments in there that obviously didn't look great for WWE, but these were things that are already public, like the steroid trial. WWE has touched on this stuff in documentaries, so I don't know. Like, there's just through 1 through 5, this is stuff that's been covered time and time again. And considering that Vince wanted this documentary made, and he was kind of the initial guy pushing for it, you could see that through the first 5. I really think that part of the thing that's going to be kind of weird for some watching this is that it feels like exactly what it was, which is a documentary that was being made, that was completed, and then they had to completely shift and do something else after the fact. It feels 100% like that because everything building up to it shows really no sign of what we know is coming in 6, and even how the wrestlers are talking and all of those kind of things. So it definitely feels like that, right? You definitely get that sense of it. And the strongest part here, from my opinion, is the Vince aspect, is the interview they do with him, because that's the only part that you look at and you go, that's kind of new. There are many parts throughout this whole thing that you get a side of Vince nobody's ever seen. It's one of the interesting parts I thought was they were talking to him about the character Vince McMahon versus the person Vince McMahon, and he's saying, yeah, they're two separate people. He's saying that Vince, the character, is not an extension of himself, but it's somebody who is that he doesn't like. It's someone that he knew when he was younger, like a rich guy when he was younger. He was basically making a archetype of someone he didn't like, and that was the character he was playing. So he's making it like, no, 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 I'm way opposite of him. But then you have all these wrestlers who are saying that is you, basically. And these weren't people that didn't like Vince either. I mean, this was Hulk, this was Cena, this was I believe, I didn't write it down, but I know that the guys they were interviewing, basically all of them were like, yeah, that, or Bruce Pritchard was another one, right? Who said, hey, that's the Vince I know, which I thought was an interesting part. And the key here is because the problem is when you watch these documentaries, a lot of people like to jump into like, this is true or this is false or this is true, this is false. What Vince is saying here is wrong, here is wrong. And to me, that stuff, it's not that it doesn't matter, but to me, what matters is why would he say that anyways? You know what I mean? Like, even if he's, let's say Vince is 100% the person that he plays on screen, right? Let's say that that's the kind of the extension of himself, as some of the people were saying. Well, the fact that even if he's lying, the fact that he's lying about it tells you a little something. It tells you something a little bit different. I thought the moments with Shane and Vince were interesting, right? Where you had Shane talking and Vince talking. I think those were the strongest parts. But like I said, the problem is that when you have to change kind of the whole documentary last minute to, the change. It's not just like, okay, we have to add in one piece of information. It's like, no, no, no. This is the big thing, right? While we were like, if this was made in 2021, this same exact documentary, everything would have been the same and everyone would have watched it and said, yeah, we've heard that, whatever. That's the same stuff with the additions of Vince. Nobody would have said two things about it. But with the new stuff that we know, that's kind of hanging over the whole thing. So you're just kind of waiting for it to get to that, and it has completely changed the story. So the main interesting part of this, I think, was Vince's, personal reaction to various scandals and various stories throughout, whether it's the Montreal Screwjob, whether it's, Shane and Stephanie and Triple H in the business, whether it's his dad. I mean, all of that, that's really the main takeaway here. And you could see now, after watching this whole thing, you could see why Vince wanted this documentary made in the first place. You could see through those first episodes his imprint in a way all over it. Not saying that the final cut was his, like that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that this is what he wanted it to be, right? Was him giving a take on all of these scandals versus how you've seen in the past if you watch Dark Side of the Ring or if you watch any of the WWE productions. He's usually not sitting there like that, kind of giving you that what do just giving you his raw honesty, I guess. Now, whether we believe it or not, that's another thing entirely. But I just thought this was a super interesting, documentary or docu series, as they call it. The reaction seems to be that everyone, like me, which is like, yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and I'm sure people who are not fans of wrestling, they're gonna love this because they're not gonna know all this. But if you're a fan of wrestling, you know all this, So this doesn't really add much to it besides those small, or not really small. I mean, Vince, the interviews he gives, that to me is the most interesting part. And look, I saw some people like, oh, I wasted 6 hours. I don't feel that way. I felt like this was well made, and it was, even though I knew a lot of this stuff, you still learned a little bit, and it was entertaining to watch. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely think, you know, I could see why Vince wanted to do this documentary, but certainly this thing went off the rails from where he wanted it to go due to things like these allegations and everything else against him. And so I think this was a tough spot for the people who made it, and I think they did about as good of a job as they could have with that. So thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.